welcome to The Aggressive Life. There's a legend about the Spanish conquistador Cortez, which, by the way, one of the most mesmerizing books I've ever read is called Conquistador. It is just amazing. It's not amazing that this guy just abused Mexicans and led to the pillaging of a country, but it really is a fascinating tale of history. And it's said that after he landed in the New World, his men didn't want to embark into the unknown. They wanted to stay on the ships. They wanted to leave themselves out. And so what did he do? He burned the ships, gathered them all on the shore, and gave his generals the orders to eliminate their exit plan, their safety plan. That's a crazy, crazy story, but it's always inspired me to think through what exit plans am I keeping around, and am I burning the ships going forward? We've got an artist with us today who's done a good number of burning of the ships. In fact, it's been an inspiration for one of their works of art. He's a part of the band King and Country. They're known for their amazing shows. Some would call them mesmerizing. They're known for their songwriting. It would be called honest songwriting. Though I'm not sure exactly, Luke, what dishonest songwriting is, but you got a different thing going on with you. They've netted 4 Grammy Awards, Dove Awards. They've seen 9 of their singles become top 10 hits, including 4 reaching the number 1. And they're doing it while talking about things that are not safe, very aggressive things that they're writing about. Suicide, addiction, pain, loss, and virtually anything that you can think of that leads to a loss of hope. They're actually writing songs about these things. And you think, well, who'd want to actually listen to songs like that? Well, a lot of people, because they're really, really solid. So welcome to The Aggressive Life, Luke Smallbone.
Thank you, man. That was quite the introduction, man. You've done your research on Cortez, and then you read something that we must have sent you. And so forgive us for ever sending us. But, you're good, man. Thank you for the intro. I appreciate it.
Oh, no, you're welcome. I appreciate you. So tell me about, for you, what was the inspiration with Cortez? Did Cortez actually inspire you in a unique artistic way?
You know what? I did something very strange in high school. I read books on a biography on Joseph Stalin. I read a biography on Hitler. And I didn't read one on Cortez, though I've read some historical fiction about him. And people were always like, why would you read books about these horrible people? And I said, well, I want to know what made them so bad. I want to know, like, what was the thing that flipped the switch on some of these guys that made these guys do unbelievably horrific things? Now, what you realize with all of these guys is they're all using a lot of things that are right before us today: influence, power, communication. They're all using these things that pretty much everybody has at our fingertips, but they did it for the wrong reasons. And so I'm always looking at things like, well, how can I use some of these things that people have learned for good, for Jesus? How can I learn from people's, past mistakes? And so for me, Cortez, that story of Burn the Ships was fascinating, because you explained it quite well. I mean, look, you've got a situation where you arrive at a place to conquer it, but he can't motivate his men because his men are always thinking about safety. They're always thinking about how they're going to get back, and so it doesn't give them the ability to move forward. And I thought, well, what a beautiful illustration of what takes place in a lot of people's lives. A lot of people are hung up on their pasts. A lot of people are hung up on the mistakes that they've made. And I'm not saying that that's wrong. Look, that's very natural. That's kind of the human order, but it doesn't allow you to move forward. And I think that, for so many of us, there's ships to burn for us to move forward, to take new ground.
There's certain things I think that we're robbed of that our predecessors or ancestors had a shot at, like actual true adventure. I'm a big adventure guy. I love being in situations where I haven't been in before, where I'm not sure what's going to happen. But I'm never going to have the dream. Just think about it, Luke. You're on a ship for months, landing in a place where no one you ever know has been. And for all you know, there's dinosaurs there. Or for all you know, there's aliens. I mean, the adrenaline rush, the fear factor had to be crazy, don't you think?
Absolutely. I just read a book on the expansion of the West, another one that is a little bit hairy at times, controversial. And that's exactly right. Even when they were down going to Mexico City, you've got, from the Americans' point of view, you've got this situation where they don't know what's around the bend. They don't know what's around the mountain. And it creates an unbelievable amount of fear. So what do you do with fear? To become really powerful in life, to give yourself the ability to move forward, you have to do everything you can to eliminate fear. And if you eliminate fear, usually you can do things that are unlike anyone else. And the reason why we're talking about Cortez, the reason why we're talking about that illustration, is because he did that. He eliminated the fear, and it gave them no choice but to move forward. Gave them no choice but to make a way for themselves. Right, wrong, or indifferent. That's what they were left with.
Do you find this value that you're talking about so well? Do you find this value is present in most creatives?
Just the idea of trying to move beyond fear.
Yeah. I mean, you're not just a drummer. You've got some deeply held convictions here that I'm not sure are held by the average creative or the average artist that would just wants to stay to their thing.
Yeah, look, music's hard. Traveling's hard, and I'm very grateful for all that God has given me. But when you're not signing up for ease of life, right? And so for me, it's because of conviction. It's because I believe in the power of music. Man, at the end of the day, if I'm not creating something that I feel is genuine or helpful to society, well, I'll allow the other people that are doing it very well to just keep on going on, right? Why am I needed? I'm needed if God has given me passion and inspiration for certain things that I get the privilege of writing songs about. Part of the reason why we write songs about the things that you listed off prior is because, music a lot of times makes the medicine go down a little bit. Right. And so when you are talking about suicide, these aren't things that people necessarily like to talk about in the open, though, you probably have the statistics more so at hand than what I do. I mean, man, most people in their life are going to deal with, in some case, suicide, whether or not directly themselves, friends. At this point, you're probably talking about everyone. Friends, uncles, aunties, family. It's a real thing, but we don't talk about it very much because it's very nuanced. Well, music gives you the ability, I think, to talk about the nuance. It gives you the ability to talk about the sadness, but it gives you the ability to talk about hope. And look, I want my life to count for something. I've been given something, and I want to steward it. I want God to use what I've got left. I don't know if I've got 50, 60, or 3 hours left. I don't know, but I do know that I'm passionate about helping people. And I want to be able to help people see things in some cases in a slightly different perspective. And I think music gives you that ability.
Yeah, the suicide stuff is just out of control. We're harming ourselves at a level that's never before been seen. I have a friend of mine who's really big in the addiction recovery community. He's kind of a guru in Cincinnati. And so he knows, based on the month, how many suicide funerals he'll have to attend. And he said since COVID, I think he said it's up 3x of what it would normally be since the beginning. We're just not well. And I think that's a really cool thing about art and your art. It's not just giving us something more beautiful to look at and listen to, which is great, which is awesome. We all need something more beautiful to look at and listen to. All of us do. But you're also trying to do that with some topics and subjects that are really pretty cruddy. Is that harder to do?
Well, look, I've had some strange things happen in my life. And ironically enough, my life got complicated when I started doing music. I got married, coming up 12 years, and got married. And it was about when we really started getting going, which is about 10 years ago, sounds crazy to say. And man, things got difficult. I got really, really sick, which was unexpected. I had to come off the road for a couple of months. I had a digestive disorder and I lost, man. I got down to, I'm a 6'4" man. I think I got down to about 125 pounds. That was the last time I looked.
Jeez.
I got really, really sick. I nearly lost my son to a near SIDS accident when he was 2 months old. Then when he was 5 months old, he had to have skull reconstruction surgery. My wife has walked through a battle of addiction that was a long time ago now, but we walked through that together. I mean, look, life has not been all, all that easy. But what I found is if you can, I once went and asked God, kind of shaking my fist, like, God, why do these things keep happening to me? These aren't easy things, to heal from emotionally and mentally. And yet there's like almost like been this pattern. And I felt God really clearly say to me, Luke, it's these stories and the outcomes reflect the goodness of my love and faithfulness to you. You don't even have to be a good storyteller to tell these stories, and they will connect with people. So tell the stories. And so, man, that's most of my life. Most of music has just been about telling honest stories about what goes on in my life, what God is teaching me. It doesn't always have to be directly to me, but man, we have people come up and sharing their stories all the time. And I sit back and I think that, what's the antithesis to the sadness that they feel? Well, there's hope. Well, how can I share that hope with that person who's struggling with feeling hopeless? And in some cases, music, it may not always be the answer, but for a certain few, it can be a part of the answer. And it's a joy for me to be able to try and write those songs.
When did you know or decide that this was going to be your career path?
Well, man, my older sister is an artist, and I grew up in and around music. And so I was on the road from a very young age. I think I started on the road when I was 9 years old.
Wow.
I was a lighting director kind of in high school, which, we homeschooled our whole life, or else I wouldn't have been able to do most of the things that I started doing. And I was playing basketball. I wanted to pursue basketball. And I knew I wasn't going to be like an NBA player, but thought, maybe I could get a college scholarship or get into coaching or, whatever it might be. And my junior year of high school, I tore my ACL. And I felt like that was a way of God saying, I don't want you to play sports. And so I was looking for something else, and I went to my mom and I said, Mom, my mom's always been a wonderful, guiding voice in my life spiritually. And she said, Luke, I believe that by the time you graduate high school, there's going to be one thing left for you to do. And so sure enough, I've been in and around music my whole life, grew up singing and playing drums and, but never really took it that seriously. And sure enough, I graduated high school and Joel comes to me and says, hey, what do you think about writing some songs and singing on some demos and just seeing where music takes us? And so we were virtually, had zero success for about 5 or 6 years. And then somebody, kind of the old story of somebody heard a song and, wanted us to kind of join forces with a record label. And here we are today. So in some cases, I feel like I'm still being called to it. It was never this big dream of this is what I'm going to do. I used to make fun of people actually that were in music, So, God is kind of, I don't feel the most qualified or the most gifted to do almost anything that I've ever done in my life. And yet, there's that saying, God qualifies the called. I mean, I'm a little bit of a walking example of that. There's far more gifted singers. There's far more gifted drummers. There's far more gifted songwriters. But yet God has given us stories. God has given us songs. And, people, there's the debate of the miracles still happen, right? People ask that a lot. And I think if you want to look at tangible miracles every single day, look at the gift of creativity, because you'll walk into a room with nothing and you leave with something. Where does it come from? It's inexplainable. Computers can't do that. Computers is ones and zeros. They're told they can merge things, they can mesh things, they can do it, but they can't take a unique thought and develop it. That's the gift of, it's a miracle every single day.
Sure is. We're uniquely designed with that capacity. And yet, I'm not sure there's that much creativity in Christianity today. I look back at where we were as being the leaders in art, and this has been well thought of and well discussed. If you go through any ancient museum with ancient artworks, you're going to see Christian art, and part of that was because that was just what was around culture, but also part of it was those great artists were influenced by things in the scriptures. And I'm not seeing the greatest art come out of the family of God these days. Why is that? I've spent a lot of time thinking through this, and you're in this world. You've probably seen it before. When somebody comes and they say, "Hey, I need a project done," and they, and they may be talking to a Christian, and they say, "Okay, well, how much can you pay to do this project?" Well, I'm starting a ministry, and I need a favor. And the problem is the motivation is always the favor and to do it on behalf of God, right? But the problem is our art and our work is not excellent enough to stand up
outside of Christians oftentimes looking at their art and having some sort of either grace or compassion for it. Because the motivating factor is, I'm trying to do good, so will you help me out? Rather than go and mastering your craft. I often say, if we want to see revival take place, people need to look at your life like it's a little bit of the burning bush. Oh my goodness, what is happening? There's something unexplainable. And a lot of times in Christendom, it's Christians looking at other Christians that way. But when you're a real true burning bush is when it's somebody who doesn't know Jesus looks at you and says, I don't kind of explain that dude, right? But he is so dang good at what he does that I have to say there's something compelling about the God that he serves, because this is unexplainable. We, for whatever reason, mail it in a little bit. And we can call it lack of funds, lack of money. But I think that the mainstream is driven by basically only one thing, and that is money. We don't hold the same convictions that the mainstream does about making money that we do for serving God. If we had the same amount of vigor that these people are, and look, I'm not saying it's right, that are just capitalistic, I'm going to beat the other person. If we had that same vigor of, I'm going to serve the Lord with all my heart, mind, and soul, and I'm going to give everything to it, you'll have great art. If you're willing to be honest and it will cost you something, you'll have great art. But the moment it gets a little bit easy, the moment it gets a little bit too cushy, your art suffers.
And what do you mean by if you're willing to be honest? What does that mean for you artistically?
I think being honest is, look, Bono said years ago, he said, look, you want to know what's wrong with Christian music and Christian art is that nobody's writing about their bad marriages. Nobody's writing about their failed friendships. Nobody's writing. We talk about sadness and we talk about some sad things that we don't feel good about, but we actually don't talk about the reason why we're sad. We don't talk about our depression. We very rarely talk about the thoughts that go through our minds of suicide, or we don't talk about, and look, we can get progressively more aggressive with the thoughts that go through our mind that we don't talk about. And that's part of the reason why when I say honest, it's not very honest. We paint a picture of ourselves that may have a little bit of boohoo, but isn't quite honest enough to actually be detrimental. But when you write a story and you write about a song that could be actually detrimental because it's that honest, well, people resonate with that because people have walked through that. People have been that sad. People have been that depressed. And that's where honesty comes in is, man, look, people aren't talking about hard things that for the most part are you walk into any store, any Walmart, people are going through the exact same things as you. And depression and all these different thoughts make us feel isolated, and they don't make us feel known. And it's a spiral that just keeps getting, it keeps going down more and more. And that's why I think it takes honesty for people to come out, because you can relate to honesty.
Do you think Christians are more open or less open to that kind of reality than the average person?
Oh, man. Look,
I'll just tell you what I'm frustrated with. I'm leading the witness, so I'll stop leading the witness. Just an observation in your industry. I'm curious if you think about this. I listen to local Christian radio where I live in Cincinnati. I'm like, when I do, because I can't take it much at all. I'll take my Spotify feed and have my own curated stuff on there. But I'm like,
I get it.
You people are, you're playing the same song, literally the same songs you did 10 years ago. Literally. Like, I don't know how you even write a song that breaks onto Christian radio, Luke. I talked to one of the program directors one time about this. They had me in to do something or other. This was years and years ago. And they said, well, people like what they like. It makes them feel good to have the old stuff. I said, maybe that's why your audience is so small. But that would never work in the rest of the world. In the rest of the world, you say, no, we have to keep churning out new creativity in whatever genre is. New creativity, we keep coming out, or else that station would shut down. But it seems like there's people in Christendom who are stuck in time warp, who want to live in the past and aren't wanting to expose themselves to new creative things for the future. Your response?
Look, you're not wrong. And it's funny because then people often say when we get into these kind of conversations, well, Luke, you must be so cynical of the church. No, the church is the hope of the world.
Yeah.
It still is. But can we be better about creating better art? Yeah. The problem with, when you get into radio, and look, radio has been good to us, and we try to be a little bit of the purple cow. But what I always say is this: when it comes to, if you found a good song is one that you can play for someone who doesn't know Jesus and connects with them, and also plays a song for someone who does know Jesus and they say it's a good song. Because here's the thing: if we're only writing songs for the convinced, then our art isn't good. And most of what you'll find at Christian radio is we're writing songs for the convinced. It's very difficult to straddle the fence of reaching people who don't know Jesus and people that do. You have to communicate in a way that is a little tricky. There's a little bit of a knife edge there. But just because it's hard doesn't mean it's impossible. And you're going to have some conviction from these program directors to start banning. Because the problem is you play a song that's too hot, that's too edgy, and they're going to give it about 2 months. And if the testing doesn't come back, they're going to drop it. Well, here's the thing. If you hang with that song, if you think it's a really brilliant song, you're actually going to change the taste of the people that are listening. Steve Jobs said, we don't ever do any research, market research for our new products. And somebody asked him, well, why? And he said, because they don't know what they want yet. And in music sometimes is similar. And look, this is an issue in Christian music, but it's not one that's insurmountable, but it's one that needs discussion. And, sign me up for this discussion.
Yeah, that's right. Like, very rarely have I ever liked a song the first time I've heard it.
Yeah. And if you did, it's probably because it was similar to something else, once again, that's not
that's a good word. Oh, that's a good word. Oh, that's right. Actually, one of our worship guys here at the church, which is my day job, he laments this, and he says that if you look at some of the breakthrough bands of yesteryear, they were breaking through with a different sound, but now we have it down. We know what kind of sound people want, and you're not hearing a lot of variation on that. We know how to make a hit now, and that's what people are trying to do, is stay inside those paradigms. Do you agree with that?
Well, look, I do. I mean, to a point. I joked with somebody in the music industry the other day, and I was like, if I hear another boom, quack, quack, boom, quack beat, it's like, there was a point, I felt like maybe at least a couple months ago that, 70% of the music had a beat of some sort of variation of that. And I just was like, this is just unbelievable to me. But, at the same time, what you'll still find is that people that are breaking out even now are still going to, if I was speaking to a young artist, I'd say, hey, make a sound that nobody's ever heard before. Because if it's if it can be replicated, why wouldn't they play that other more established artist? It's a safer bet for them. So the only way for you to be able to make kind of a headway in all of this is if you create a sound that has never really been heard before. If you're going to sing a little bit differently, because look, I'm not dogging on Chris Tomlin, but if you're going to sing like Chris Tomlin, why wouldn't they just play Chris Tomlin? They're just going to play Chris Tomlin. Yes. So even the ones that have broken out over the last, let's pick some over the last 20 years. You may have some that break for a second, but ones that have stayed, when they still came out, they still originally had either a new thought, new message, or a new sound. You've had some that have success for a second, but then they fizzle away, and it's because they're not unique enough.
Fascinating. We're staying on the artistic, creative side, but man, that's a truth for every single industry right there.
Think of some of your favorite brands. If you're into Apple products, unless an Apple product becomes something that's, another product becomes so much different and so much better than Apple, you're just going to keep buying Apple products. This is too easy. It's not that unlike most every other genre.
Yeah, and if you look at what churches are popping for the long haul, they're ones that have a unique vision, a unique feel, taste. But then if you look at the new churches that are starting, they all look the same. They do. I hate to say that. They do. They all have the same kind of music. They all have the same kind of young pastor who has the same kind of look. They have the same kind of video. They have the same, and there's probably a thing there that's good to maybe attract the masses. But for longevity and sustainability and impact, we've got to start having some people start churches that have a different vision than the latest iteration of Stephen Furtick, who was really the latest iteration of Bill Hybels, who was really the latest iteration of Robert Schuller, who was really the latest. I mean, we've got to figure out who's God made me to be, and I've got to be the one that starts something new and tries something new.
Yeah, no, well, and look, we could probably go around and around on this for a long time, but I think it has a lot to do with we don't really know who we are under God. You know, when you get into like the image of God, like who were you actually created to be? Like what has God, because I tell my kids, I try to tell, hey man, you may not do what daddy does, and daddy may not do what you do. That's good, because you want to have some variety. Man, if you want to do construction, become the greatest skid steer driver ever in the history of skid steer drive, because that reflects something. Do something. Know who you are, because a lot of times people are becoming like somebody else for power. Because if they become like somebody else, but in your local community, you can go to a Stephen Furtick-like church. But is that actually who? Because, you know, God only gave us so many gifts, right?
Right.
But when we're just posing, it just gets and look, there's no shame on this. I think a lot of people may think like, oh, well, Luke's coming down, or you know, they're coming down a little bit hard on some of these people. Man, no. Look, the truth is, I've been that person. You probably have as well. You've probably taught a sermon on something that, you know, you may want to have back, you know.
Oh, more than a.
Yeah.
A lot, actually. No, I actually don't think we're cracking on anybody. Actually, I was cracking on the radio industry, I guess. But no, I don't think we're cracking on anybody. I think what we're trying to do is preach to the choir here, which is you and I, preach to ourselves. I had a friend. He's a guy who's kind of a local motivational guru. And he had a line years ago. It stuck with me. He said, cover bands don't change the world. You know, if you need to have a crowd quickly and pay some bills, you want to have a cover band. If I'm out at a bar, I want a cover band playing AC/DC or whatever like that, or King and Country. You know, I want that happening. But if you actually want to have sustainability and actually change the world, you've got to find your own voice and add something new to the party. I think that's a challenge for all of us, no matter what industry we're in.
That's good.
All right, so Luke, a couple questions. I know you got other stuff going on today, but hey, if you've got a lot of folks, this is their first time, but King and Country, some people are like, I didn't even know it was a Christian music industry. Other people are like, King and Country, never knew there was a band called King and Country. If you were to have somebody right now go to Spotify and say, start with this song, what song should they start with to understand your heart and your craft?
Well, I mean, look, you know, you've got the songs that were the ones that were, you know, because you understand the themes probably and the sermon series that you've done that have been the most successful. Usually, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best sermon series out there, but it just reached the most people, right? And so for that, you have to take that into account, right? And so I think for us, you know, there's a song called "God Only Knows" that is probably one that people know us, you know, by, and it reached probably the widest, if that makes sense, you know, into, you know, like I say, the convinced and the unconvinced, you know, it reached, you know, in some cases, a little bit of both. But we have a new project that's coming out called, the album's called What Are We Waiting For? It comes out March 11th. And that first single off of that album is a song called Relate. And I love that because, you know, it is, you know, we're trying to push the sonics of music. And it's a little bit different for us. But I love it because, you know, when we walked through the last 2 years of the mayhem that we've all walked through, there was a lot of finger pointing and there was a lot of, you know, and I'm not going to get into all of that, but the song really is about, hey, what does it look like to have empathy and compassion in today's day and age? Because a lot of times it's a little bit like, hey, if you're on the blue side or the red side, you know, if you're on that side, then I can agree. And if you're on my side, you know, I can agree. If you're on the other side, I can't agree. And we're just not going to be friends. Well, that's not how humanity works. You know, it's a great thing to have diverse thought. But sometimes it takes a few of us to have compassion for that angry Facebook comment or that angry Instagram or TikTok, you know, whatever it was, to actually say, hey, the reason why that person said that is because, man, they're probably really hurting, you know, hurt people, you know? And so it's one of the songs that I'm proud of, just in the sense of the messaging, because I hope for this coming year, that we become people that are just a little bit more understanding. I have a hard time thinking that Jesus was out there just screaming and ranting all the time. A lot of times it says that he felt great compassion for, so he healed them. It wasn't, he felt, I need to. It was free because he had great compassion.
Yeah.
What does it look like for us to have that compassion?
That's a good word. Well, Luke, where can people go to get more of your stuff, find out about you? I know here in my local city, Cincinnati, you got a tour stop coming, so let us know how to connect.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're in all the places that most people are at, but forkeyandcountry.com is the website, and if you do any search on any of the places, unless it's one that's not doing their job well, it'll probably lead to the socials and so forth and so on, and so we'll hopefully find you there.
And what was the inspiration behind your name, King and Country?
Well, man, we were just known as Joel and Luke. It's my brother and I for a long time, and we thought we really don't want to be just known as Joel and Luke for the rest of our lives, do we? And so we had a producer friend of ours that we're working with, and we came in with the band name All the King's Men. And he spun around and was like, "Hey, what about the band name for King and Country, like the old British mantra that they used to chant before going into battle?" Huh. And we looked at each other and we're like, "Man, that has meaning. I mean, the reason why we do music is for king and for country, for people." And so it just felt like a little bit of a, not to be cheesy, but like every time they announce for King and Country, it's a little bit of a reminder of the reason we do what we do and who we are.
That's really cool. Man, is there anything else you want to talk about that we haven't talked about?
No, man, this has been intellectually stimulating conversation, so I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, it has been. I got to tell you, I'm wishing we had longer time right now. We ought to do like a Joe Rogan episode sometime, like just 3 hours. Doesn't matter how long it takes. I mean, I won't get high or get wasted with the people like he does, but just like, let's just talk forever, because you're one of those dudes I could do that with. It's been a really great segment, so thank you, man. Hey, listen to Luke. He's got some phenomenal wisdom for us. This isn't an artist thing. This is an aggressive life thing. That's why we're here. Go out and make something different of your life. Stop doing what everybody else is doing. That's the passive stuff. Do something that's pushing you, that's going to get you something you don't have right now. That's the aggressive life. We'll see you next time on The Aggressive Life. Hey, thanks for listening. For all things aggressive living, why don't you head over to briantome.com. Find my new book, Move, a guide to get up and go forward, as well as articles and much, much more. And no matter where you listen to podcasts, why don't you take a second and leave us a rating, leave us a review. It really, really helps us drive new listeners to the show. We want to help as many people as possible, just like we may have helped you. We want to help others. So why don't you help us out? And if you want to connect, find me on Instagram @BrianTome. The Aggressive Life with Brian Tome is a production of Crossroads Church, Cincinnati, Ohio.